Greetings. Hello, 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 hello. Hope you are well on this Sunday afternoon. Hope you're reaching your highest and most positive level of mental, physical, and spiritual health today. So happy to be coming at you on this Sunday talking about our 125th episode of Our Ancestors' Voices. So happy to be here with you. This is the first week in a month, and I've been in my actual residence doing this program. Just family business just has had me on the road an awful lot, and I wasn't even able to participate last week. So thank you, Shakur, for holding it down. But we are both here today and looking forward to talking to you about the topic of the tragedy of Libya in North Africa and the role of the Barack Obama administration in sabotaging Libya, which has been for many years, had been Africa's shining light. I just want to say, it gives us no great pleasure to have to break down the legacy of Barack Obama the way we do. We are not confused about why our people have regard for this man and his family. We understand that. I mean, we've been beaten down for 500 years, and we've been taught that the gauge of success and progress is how far we advance within the master system. I mean, we can deny that all we want, but everything we do clearly illustrates that that's what we believe. And so here this man comes elevated to what they tell you is the highest position in their system. So of course, African people, not just in the US, but all over the world, are going to look to that as a symbol of progress. And we're not the least bit confused about that. But what we also understand is that we have to always look at everything that happens based on a lens of truth and justice. We can't just be sentimental. We can't just let sentimentality guide us in terms of our principles. That is not going to allow us to create the world that we need. That is not going to lead us to being the type of people that we need to be. So we have to be willing to do that. And that means being self-critical at all times. And most of us don't ever do that. We don't even know how to do that. And so the minute there's some self-critical analysis, we feel like we're being attacked. And that's something we have to grow in a political maturity sense so that we can have the type of analysis we need to move forward. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Because if we don't learn how to do that, then there really isn't any difference between us and how we view people like Obama and how we so vehemently criticize Trump supporters. What's the difference? Like, it's all based on sentimentality. None of it is based on analysis and information and fact. It's just based on how we feel, how we want to feel. That's why they love him, because he makes them feel good. And I know you don't want to be the same as them. So the only difference is a critical analysis. So buckle your seatbelt, but that's what we're going to do during today's program. And we want to start by, as we always do, giving respect and honor to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. I had the privilege and honor Friday, the United Farm Workers, Indigenous Peoples Labor Union. If you've eaten fruits and vegetables, you've definitely partaken. I don't care where you live on Earth, you've partaken in something that was picked for you by the indigenous people of the United Farm Workers. And they had a march of 10,000 people Friday, and I very humbly did street security for them for their march and was proud to do that. So we do everything we can to support and honor our indigenous comrades in their fight for self-determination. And we honor and respect our African ancestors. And this program today, if anything, speaks directly to all of our ancestors who were lost from the brutal and barbaric destruction of Libya in 2011, including our comrade brother Muammar Gaddafi and his family. So we are going to be talking about that today. And we start, as we always do, by just introducing for you who we are. Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the AAPRP. And the AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan-African political party that is based in Africa. And our objective is Pan-Africanism, which is defined as one unified socialist Africa. Pan-Africanism, one unified socialist Africa. And if you want to understand how we see our work being carried out to achieve this Pan-Africanism, one unified socialist Africa, you can look at the book on the right, the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare by Kwame Nkrumah. In it, he lays out the strategy of uniting all of the Pan-African revolutionary formations on the ground in Africa into one body. And one great example we're going to be illustrating, Shakur started it last week, but we're going to continue to do it every week, is we have comrades on the ground in Burkina Faso, a West African country that sits right above Ghana if you look at a map. And in Burkina Faso, our comrades on the ground there have been instrumental in facilitating the existence of the Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity, the Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity. And if you don't know, Thomas Sankara was a revolutionary Pan-Africanist leader who emerged in Burkina Faso in the 1980s and was assassinated by imperialism in 1987. But his vision, you know, like Fred Hampton said, they can kill the revolutionary, but they can't kill the revolution. So his vision still lives strongly today. And the center is one of the vehicles that is used to advance that work. And that center is certainly a part of our Pan-African work that we're describing here. They have a book center. They're trying to bring real literary consciousness to our people in Burkina Faso. And they only need as a budget, like somewhere in the neighborhood of $800 a month. And they're less than halfway there. And if they don't achieve that, they'll be forced to close their doors in 3 months. And we're not going to let that happen. So we have here on our screen a QR code in the upper right-hand corner. And we also will have the link that I'll read out for those of you that aren't looking at a screen. But what we want to ask you to do is use your smartphone, and please bring your phone to the screen to that QR code so you can scan it. And what we're asking you to do is sponsor our Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity in Burkina Faso. Whatever you can sponsor. If you can pay $50 a month, pay that. If you can sign up for $40, $30, $10 a month, do that. We just need everybody to make a contribution. And this is great for people who say that they're for African unity or for Black people getting together. There's no better example of that than the work that the APRP is doing all over the world. So if you truly believe that and you're not just saying it, then these are the types of things you should be putting your energy and resources behind. No one's going to educate our people if we don't do it. So this center is a classic example of that. So please do that. Please support it. We'll reiterate that several times throughout the program every week, but we need you to respond, and please support our comrades at home in the All African People's Revolutionary Party in Burkina Faso, as well as our other comrades who are part of the Pan-African work that we were doing there and all over Africa and all over the African world. And our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by myself, Ajamu, and daughter Shakura, who of course are active organizers within the AAPRP. And I will turn it over to Shakura. The QR code is there on the screen. The link is also there for the Thomas Sankara Center. Please, while you're listening, support independent revolutionary Pan-African revolutionary work. Please do that. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Shakura.
Ashe, thank you. Muchas gracias, Padre. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Greetings, everyone. Yes, please support our comrade. I just feel so honored to be able to understand what it means to sign up as a sponsor, because instead of, signing up for some undirect organization that you think is using your money to do God knows what with it, we have a clear relationship with our comrade who has started this fundraiser. This comrade, I was actually privileged to be in the same work study circle with them, and they moved to Burkina Faso, I think sometime last year or even the year before, but they've been there for a little minute now, just doing some incredible work. And so this is not a scam. This is not a, where we're trying to get your money. And this is nothing like that. We really need to make sure that our children at home, as well as all over the world and in the diaspora, are learning more about who they are. And the best way to do that is for us to teach them that. We're also trying to help adults learn more about who they are and get more increased political education. You all should be very tired of hearing us say that at this point, because we have said it every day for the last 125 episodes. And the reason for that is because if you don't know anything about who you are in terms of your ancestors, in terms of what your ancestors have done and sacrificed for you to be who you are today, then you're not going to be able to make a difference and contribute to the world, because there's no way that you can do that unless you have ascertained knowledge based on what our ancestors have left behind for us. Because unfortunately, the work is not over. The work that they have started is not over. We have not freed Africa yet. Okay, the Western land has not been freed for the indigenous people. Occupied Palestine is not free for Palestinians. So we still have a long way to go in terms of making sure that those spaces get back to their rightful owners. And the best way to do that is to study the methodology that our ancestors have already contributed to and worked out for us, which is why we need to pick up books and read more about what they have done. These struggles have been going on for ages. They didn't just start last summer when George Floyd was murdered, right? They didn't just start 2 summers ago, and they didn't just start 5 years ago when others like Trayvon Martin and Tamir Rice and other folks were murdered. This also means that we understand that this is an international problem. People everywhere are under attack, especially if they are colonized. And so again, the best way to stop that, the best way to get in the way of the oppressor, the best way to stop oppression is to understand not only who you are and where you have come from and identify with that gladly, but be able to collect tools that you can put in your metaphoric toolbox of ways to address those problems and deal with them. Because thank goodness our ancestors have suffered in the same way we have. Thank goodness that they had enough wherewithal to write about their path and their methodologies for ways that they were addressing these problems. If they hadn't documented that, we would have no idea what to be doing. We would have no idea. So we should honor that. We should be grateful for that. And we should pick up a book and read more about what's happening. We should pick up a book and read more about Amilcar Cabral. Pick up a book and read more about Assata Shakur. Pick up a book and read more about Kwame Nkrumah. Pick up a book and read more, as much as you can on Sekou Touré. These are keys and strategies for us. Learn more about my shero and comrade, Theodora Gomes. Read more about these folks. Learn more about what's happening and understand how these folks have been navigating through this space for a long period of time and been able to collect information. If you were doing any other project, you may be in a space where you would just do it without knowing what you're doing. But if you're critical and analytical and you want to do it right, then you're probably going to read some type of instruction or format. If you're putting together a desk, if you're building a crib for a child, if you're building a play structure of some type, even if you're training your dog and making sure they don't have house accidents, you're finding a way to follow some type of structure and information or instruction standard to do that. So understanding who you are as a person, understanding your background, and understanding how it's your responsibility to make sure that your people achieve freedom, that should be no different than reading the instruction manual for building a desk. And so we encourage you all to see political education as a means, literally, to guide you. And that's why we're asking you to pick up a book and to do that. So without further ado, we are going to continue to talk about how Libya has been sabotaged by the United States. And so, of course, I just want to start off by reminding us, when we think about this, many Africans have this ideology that they just need to understand that because they are living within US borders, right? Or because they are living within capitalist borders, I should say, which extends past the US, then that reality makes it so that there is nothing else better in the world, which means they should just be content with what their current conditions are. They should be grateful. They should not complain. And that should be the case. And so for many Africans, this is why they aspire to take on what a lot of us call the quote unquote house slave mentality. And the reason I call it that is because the house slaves have an investment to protect the plantation by any means necessary, even if it means putting their own lives in jeopardy. There were so many Africans, unfortunately, because of the transatlantic slave trade, where they found another way to divide and conquer us. So as you know, as many of you may know, we had some Africans that were more appeasing and more aesthetically appropriate, or for whatever reason, they were selected to work in the house in terms of maintaining the actual built structure of the plantation. And then you had other Africans that unfortunately had to work in the hot sun every single day picking cotton. The ones in the house were still slaves and they were still considered property of the master. They were also, however, enabled to special services and resources that the field slaves did not have access to. And so I say that to say a lot of house slaves started to develop this ideology that they were better than field slaves because they had a closer connection to the master, because they were able to have access to fans and liquids that field slaves didn't have access to. And so that ideology didn't, end when we started going to work buildings instead of picking cotton, because we always still say in the party that we still have slaves today. We still have a slave plantation that we go to today. When I go back to campus next week, I'll be going to my slave on Tuesday in 2022. And so just to be clear about that, so we have the house slave and we have the field slave. And so the house slaves had this ideology that they thought they were better than any other slave who was not also permitted to be considered in the house. And so because of that, it's a very dangerous ideology, because the house slave is willing to do whatever it takes to protect the plantation, because they feel like they have an investment in making sure the plantation can stay in place so that they can maintain their status quo and maintain their hierarchy and maintain their ability to live comfortably, for lack of a better term. Why is this important and relevant to today's seminar? Well, if you think about it in more context, the house slave is even willing to put their own life in jeopardy for the greater good of the master or the plantation. And don't get it twisted, non-Africans can take on the house slave mentality too. Why? Because the mentality is basically a part of a larger ideology that reforms, socializes, and enforces all of us to believe that we need to protect, we need to promote, and we need to serve the capitalist agenda. This also means that we need to be willing to put ourselves in crossfire. We need to be willing to use our body as a physical shield for threats coming for capitalism. What does this look like? Well, this is why Facebook stopped airing our seminars, because we were considered a threat to capitalism as a seminar, and Facebook didn't want to promote that anymore, because their job is to be a house slave and to protect the master and the plantation. This is also why we have white supremacists who are listening right now and have tried in the past to come into these seminars and sabotage and jeopardize our information of what we have going on. They've tried to infiltrate. And we know that Europeans are not the only ones who can, promote white supremacy, but we have Europeans who have tried to infiltrate in different organizations that are fighting oppression. We also see this when you go to your job and maybe you complain about an inhumane condition. Take myself for an example. I've mentioned this to you before. I'm a graduate student. I work on my campus. I have taught instruction and taught classes, and I also work at the Writing Center as the assistant director. And so with that being said, I don't get health insurance, which I think is extremely unethical, because I'm working close to 60 hours a week by the time I'm prepping for my classes or consulting students that are bringing in writing materials. So I should be allowed to get health insurance. I mean, my eyes are extended with the screen time. I need glasses. I need vision insurance. I definitely have chest pains and heart palpitations. I need to go see a cardiologist, and I need dental insurance because I've started grinding my teeth since the pandemic. I'm saying all this to say, you all, that for the last 3.5 years, graduate students have been fighting to get health insurance. And our responses have been, we need to be grateful to have a job. Responses have been, we need to stop complaining. Responses have been, other people have it worse than us in other countries. Those have been the responses to us when we have literally asked for the basic need that we deserve. You also have to think about how there are other universities that are providing graduate assistance with insurance. So it's specifically universities that just don't want to provide that, okay? Because other universities understand we need to make sure that these folks have what they need so that they can keep producing for us and keep providing for capitalism. But my university hasn't figured that out yet. And so that's a contradiction within itself. And that's why people will say to you, when you tell them that you're fighting for something that will help enhance in environments and help enhance humanity, if it is against the capitalist ideology, and if you are trying to stop capitalism, for lack of a better term, then they will tell you, oh, you're speaking like a communist. You need to stop saying that, right? Just like they'll tell you that other people have it worse, or just like they'll tell you you should be grateful for a job. But in actuality, you have a right to say that you deserve health insurance. That's not a, like, you're not cursing for saying that. You're not wishing death on anybody for saying that. You're saying that you work 60 hours a week and you deserve to have an opportunity to have benefits to compensate all the labor and exercise and gas that you're putting in, physical exercise that you're putting your body in that situation every single day. And so those are some of the contradictions that we see. And so if we move forward with that, then people are accusing you of being a communist because you're literally asking for the basic necessities to survive, literally. Then you're considered a communist. And we know that that's not true, because we know communism hasn't even happened yet, but that's another seminar for another day. We're not even going to go into that today. What we want to leave you with this first bullet is just understanding that basically speaking out against this current system means that you are evil, and it means that you can't be trusted, and it means that you are unpatriotic, because how dare you speak out and acknowledge the inconsistencies that exist? How dare you acknowledge that things should be better? How dare you acknowledge that things are not right? How dare you acknowledge that things should not be as they are, because people deserve better? For you to be a humane person and to acknowledge those things, that's a problem. And that means that capitalism is not going to be able to rely on your allyship. And so therefore, people consider you a threat. And that's why we move into the second bullet, where people start to think about how this is not an opportunity where we get to complain, right? And so when we do complain, that means that people feel like the training has taught us that we should not complain. We should just be grateful. We should honor those who work for capitalism. This is why we have to stand when we go to events, sporting events and things, to honor, you know, I couldn't even think of the name for a minute, the Star Spangled Banner and things like that. And so that's because they're teaching us that we need to live in the land of the free, while not acknowledging that everything that Western land has was stolen. It's not the land of the free if it took everything that it has to make it what it is, including some of the people who are on the Western land. They were stolen as well. So we need to understand the land itself was stolen. Some of the people and the inhabitants on the land were stolen. Let's break it down. We're talking about Africans. We're talking about spices that were stolen. We're talking about resources. We're talking about coltan, cobalt, rubber, cacao, culture, language, mannerisms, humanity. Love for earth was stolen. Respect for earth was stolen and eradicated. I see people littering all the time when I'm driving, and it irritates every bone in my body, because that is the best way I think we can disrespect the indigenous people, by saying we don't even think that protecting your land and cleaning up after ourselves is relevant to helping us manage what we need to do, which is disgusting. Because I don't know about you, but if I invited someone over to my space and they threw their cup on my carpet, I would be outraged. But that's what we see every single day. We see people walking or driving and they just throw stuff out their window as they're driving. It's despicable. We have lost respect for indigenous people. We don't have that anymore. That was stolen when we became colonized. Respect for colonized people has been stolen, because people who are colonized are not considered important. They are not considered significant. They are not considered humane, and therefore they should not be treated with respect. All of this was stolen and disregarded because it did not align with the capitalist values. You need to understand that. You need to understand that. And so if you push back against capitalism, then people are going to see you as a threat, and therefore you need to be taken out, because you cannot promote any rhetoric or language that resists the capitalist agenda. If you do that, then that means you're not protecting capitalism. If you're not protecting capitalism, then you're considered an enemy. This is very simple, okay? And so because of that, then what happens to people who are resisting capitalism? What happens to them in terms of them not protecting the capitalist agenda? Well, a lot of times they die sooner. Because they're a threat, and so FBI, CIA will literally take them out and find ways to kill them, make sure that they get murdered, and then phase it and make it look like something else happened, like they had a heart attack or something else because they were probably poisoned or something. Also, you're more likely to die sooner because you are already dealing with all of the actual stressors that come with organizing, that come with living as an oppressed person, or that come with living as an oppressed person, plus you have another intersection on top of that. So maybe you are an oppressed person and you're also differently abled. Maybe you're an oppressed person and you identify as LGBTQ+. Maybe you're an oppressed person and you identify as a woman or a non-male. And so we have all these different intersections that make it very hard for you to just live a healthy life, because capitalism does not care about your health. And if anybody understands that, we've talked so much about Cuba. I appreciate all that Cuba has done for real public health. Public health in the United States is not what I'm talking about. Real public health is seen time and time again from places like Cuba and other places where they actually value a person's ability to be healthy. And what does that look like? That means they provide situations and environments where people's health is put on the very top shelf. And you have to understand, in circumstances like that, you're not going to have people dying from hypertension, aneurysms, like my grandmother at the age of 38. There's no reason that a 38-year-old should be dying of an aneurysm in their brain, but yet it happens every single day. It happens in my family. I have so many people in my family who suffer from hypertension. Every African person suffers from hypertension. Every African person suffers from diabetes. Every African person may suffer from obesity, depending on what their circumstances and biology and genealogy and all of that stuff looks like. And why is all of this? Some of it is behavior, yes, because we need to eat healthier and exercise and things like that, yes. But the overwhelming majority is not because JoJo is eating at McDonald's. That is not why JoJo is obese and has hypertension. The overwhelming majority of why JoJo is obese and has hypertension is because JoJo lives in a capitalist society where JoJo might work as a graduate instructor and can't even afford health insurance to pay out of their pocket. So because they can't afford to pay health insurance, they're working 60 hours a week, which means they're literally packing on stress from a biological and an allostatic load stress level. Y'all need to look up allostatic load if you're not familiar with that. That literally connects how the oppression that you experience literally creates stressors in your system, in your brain, in your blood, all of that, and then connects back to your brain and communicates to your brain that you feel stressed because you are experiencing oppression. Look that up if y'all don't know, I'm telling you. So JoJo is experiencing this allostatic stress on top of the fact that they don't have health insurance, on top of the fact that they maybe live in a food insecure neighborhood, on top of the fact that maybe they live in a hospital insecure neighborhood, okay? So they don't have access to food. They don't have access to know how to pay their bills. They don't have stable income because they're a grad instructor and they're not making what they deserve to make, but they're working the hours for it, and they don't have health insurance. Is it any wonder that JoJo is gonna die before the age of 60? Why do we wonder that? And if they don't die from all the health issues, then they're going to die from being shot down by the police. If they don't die from being shot down by the police, I told you the FBI is after them because JoJo's been organizing in a socialist organization since they were a toddler. And the FBI already knows what their social security number and address and all that stuff is. So these are the circumstances that we're living under, you all. Many of us live in deplorable housing conditions. That's another contributing factor to our health and why we're more likely to die sooner. Because a lot of us can't afford to live in areas where there's not mold and insulation that is poorly installed in our apartments or housing or condo structures. So because of that, we're breathing all of that in, which affects our respiratory. This is why a lot of us develop asthma and allergies and things like that. And then before you know it, again, we don't have health insurance. We're not able to get treatment for these things. And even if we do have health insurance, we're not treated like decent human beings when we go to these hospital settings. So then we don't want to keep going back because we don't want to be disrespected. And before you know it, we're still not managing this disease or this issue, this respiratory challenge that we're facing. We all know that inhalers are one of the most expensive things that a person can have. And so if you don't have health insurance, it would make it really hard for you to get access to something like that. If you do have it, then you still need to weigh in how you're going to be treated when you go to the provider, because a lot of times providers don't listen to colonized people. They just overspeak them and tell them what the problem is, and they don't practice good listening skills because of white supremacy. And so then we have all these different entanglements that cause it very hard for us to just live and organize. And all of that is by design. All of that is by design. You're not supposed to be able to organize with ease. If that was the case, then everybody would do it. So we have to continue to think about how all of these things just make it very challenging for us. Next slide, please. Oh, you're already there. Thank you. All right. And so in that, I'm just going to wrap up you all by saying, because of that, this system has convinced most of us that this is also why we've developed emotional barriers. So we talk in many times about imposter syndrome. We also talk about low self-esteem. You're scared to think outside the box. If you do, because of media and because of other spaces, you've been taught time and time again that when you do resist, you're going to be punished for it. Maybe going to jail, maybe getting killed, whatever that looks like. But that's also a part of the capitalist system, is to protect what's in place, to remind you to stay in your place and to not push back. And if you do, then there's going to be consequences. Your family is going to suffer. You're going to suffer. Your children might suffer. There's going to be situations that are going to take place. I would also stress that when we lack political education, that also feeds into the fact that we're already not considered human, which is why we get treated inhumanely. Plus, we have systems like imperialism that make it really hard. Capitalism and imperialism make it really hard for us to just live in a world where we deserve respect, and we'll get that. And so then you have situations where imperialism, capitalism, those things are impacting people everywhere. It's impacting their safety. It's impacting their livelihood. We're going to talk in just a minute about how it impacts their literal water structure in some spaces. I mean, we still have comrades in Flint, Michigan that still don't have clean water. We have comrades all over the world who struggle with being able to negotiate water practices and rations when it comes to doing other things or exchanging items so that they can get access to water for that day. We also think about how we have so many places that are food insecure, even today, where they don't even know where their next meal is going to come from. And then last but not least, this also means that education systems are impacted by imperialism and capitalism, which affects all of this, because if people have the ability to get educated and to increase their political education, they're more likely to change the conditions and get rid of imperialism. But that we can't have that. So we have to threaten education as much as we can and make it really hard and make people feel discouraged so that they won't try to change the conditions, because this is working for capitalism and they don't want to change things. They want to manage it and keep it the same. Remember, capitalism is all about promoting private entities to continue to make money so that that private entity can have stable income and manage that income. And so if you change that system and you make it so that that system can't do that anymore, you're affecting their income. You're affecting their stream of income, literally. And so just in closing, we also just need to think about, I always say, you know, the saying, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? So the reality has made it so that, you know, if you do succeed, it's because you worked hard. And instead of that, the opposite of that, I should say, if you did not succeed, it's because you should have tried harder. It's because you should have applied yourself. Why didn't you do what you needed to do? I was so appreciative when I spoke to people at the start of the pandemic, and they were saying, yeah, well, you know, you knew you were going to lose your job. Why didn't you save up more money? And I just really thought that that was mind-boggling, that someone would make that assumption, that a person just has the ability to have money in their savings and not touch it because other emergencies don't happen. And so then when they have to tap into their savings, you have the nerve to pass judgment on them because they should have done better. Are you serious right now? I also was sitting in on a panel a couple of years ago, and there was a pediatrician talking about their exchanges with African parents who had just given birth. And the pediatrician said they were monitoring a Twitter group. And one of the African parents said they were struggling with human lactation production and were just trying to figure out some other things. They also thought about going to see the child's pediatrician, but they didn't really trust the doctor and were just thinking about some other things. And then another parent said, well, I just prefer to talk to other people. I don't really talk to the doctor about my child's issues, blah, blah, blah. And so the pediatrician that I was in the same room with said that they responded to the Twitter chat and said, you need to take your child to the doctor. You don't know what health issues they're having. You know, you're not a doctor, you don't know. And I just thought to myself, but you don't know what their situation is, though. And when they do fail, you're going to blame them as a parent when you're not even taking into account how the system has made it very difficult for this parent to parent their child. for lack of a better term. And so after the panel, I went up to the European and I said, hey, I was just wondering, when you said that to the parent, do you know for sure that they had access to health insurance? Do you know if they had, a doctor in mind or anything? I said, because I was just wondering, depending on what their background is, a lot of Africans have justifiable reasons for why we don't trust medical systems, why we don't trust research, why we don't trust experimentation, things like that. And so if a parent is telling you they don't want to take their child to the doctor, I was just wondering, your approach sounds like it could have been different, because it sounded like it was pretty judgmental, when that parent may not have had a reason to even go to the doctor because they don't know a doctor they can trust, or maybe they have reason not to trust. And you're assuming that they can even go to a doctor when they may not even have health insurance. And the pediatrician said, I never thought of that. I don't know if they have health insurance. And I just said, wow, like I just don't understand how you could have not thought of that. Like that would be the first thing that I would think of. That would be the first thing that I would think of. But I don't benefit from white supremacy. So that lack of elitism makes me humble in terms of how I talk to people, you see? So it's just very different. And so I'm going to pass it back to my dad and just remind you all, support our comrades in Burkina Faso, and make sure that you understand the importance of resisting capitalism. It is a risk to do that, because you are considered an enemy once you do that, and you have a marked on your scarlet letter, for lack of a better term. But the other part of that is, do you want to live in a world where capitalism is reminding you that you're not significant every day? And if the answer is no, then you should join an organization so that you can help us fight to get rid of that. Ashe.
Ashe, Ashe. So we want to get with the foundation we've had, Shakur has delivered to us. We want to just again remind you, the QR code on the screen, we are encouraging people, asking people, begging, pleading, cajoling, whatever is needed for people to volunteer to become supporters of our Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity in Burkina Faso, which is in West Africa. Our comrades on the ground there are running a center that's providing much needed services to the community there as it relates to education and organizing work, as a part of our work to bring about Pan-Africanism. And they need a budget of no more than about $800 a month. And they're less than halfway there, and they won't be able to sustain the center if they don't get that. So please use your smartphone, the QR code on the screen, become a donator. Whatever you can do. If you can do $5 a month, please do that. If you can do more than that, do that. If you can do $100 a month, do that. No one's going to support our liberation if we don't do it. So, I hear all this all the time, support Black business. To hell with that. Support African liberation. Okay, because most of these quote unquote Black businesses are doing nothing to help our people. They're just stuffing money in their pockets. Their whole role model is the capitalist system. So they're just imitating the white people that came before them and taught them how to make money in this system. So that's insanity for an oppressed people to think that that's our road to liberation. I'm so sick of all this Negro entrepreneur talk. Like, you don't know 5 people that have made $1 million in your life, and you never will, because that's a fantasy. But we can get free. That's not no fantasy. So please support our actual on the ground work. We shouldn't have to beg for this. I mean, we should run to this stuff. If we were healthy thinking people, we would do that. So please do that. Please donate. The link is there if you don't have a smartphone. But if you do, use the QR code and do that. And then we're just going to spend the last minutes that we have talking specifically about Libya and what happened in Libya. Libya is a country in North Africa, and the brief history of the Jamihiriya is that in 1969, September 1st, the Great September Revolution occurred, where Lieutenant Colonel Muammar Gaddafi led a group of military officials to overthrow the government of King Idris. Now, King Idris was a puppet leader who was placed in power by imperialism. And when we say imperialism, we don't just mean the United Snakes of America. Certainly they're the ringleader, but as the first slide indicated, those are just some of the examples of imperialist countries. The Zionist state of Israel, imperialist country. France, imperialist country. Britain, imperialist country. Australia, imperialist country. Germany, Belgium, all of them are snake, thug, low, snot on the ground imperialist countries. And they dominate the world. They dominate the capitalist world today. And the capitalist world dominates the whole world. So King Idris was a puppet for imperialism. And his job, as is the role of neo-colonial puppet leaders in colonized countries, is to ensure that the capitalist countries can have full access to the resources of a country without any type of obstacle. And the reward for these puppet leaders doing that is they get little, they get comfortable lives and cars and houses and big bank accounts. And that's all they care about. All the masses of people get nothing. I just gave you the definition of neo-colonialism. Well, King Idris was that type of leader in Libya, and his job was to control the massive oil wealth that was generated in the country. And he made sure that Chevron oil had full access to it. And as long as he did that, as long as the people were oppressed, nobody cared. Well, Gaddafi led a group of people who did care, and they overthrew King Idris on September 1st, 1969. And from that, they instituted the Libyan Jamihiriya, the people's country in Libya, governed by the Green Book that you see in the picture Gaddafi reading. And don't sit here and tell us, oh, that's no good. You know damn well you didn't even know there was a Green Book, and you certainly haven't read it. So read it first, because we have. And then once you do that, then maybe you can, study Libya, because we have. And then we can have a conversation, but we're not wasting our time with nonsense. We don't have time for that. So they started the Libyan Jamihiriya, and they instituted policies that were designed to bring about a people's republic in Libya. Now, of course, in order to do that, you can't do that just based on having a military coup d'etat, which is what Gaddafi led. Because as anyone that knows anything about revolution knows, revolutions are always mass. They involve the masses of people. They don't involve a few people. Military coup d'etat involves a few people. So people who genuinely have a concern, but there is the possibility for people to stage a military coup d'etat and to do so in a way that leads to mass empowerment. That is possible. And the way that that happens is that the people who lead the military coup d'etat institute plebiscites or referendums. And these are mass participatory processes where people vote and decide whether they agree with the action that is taking place or not. And if they don't agree with the action, then the people have the opportunity to do something else. If they do agree with the action, then they move forward in consolidating the efforts of the action. And that's what they did in Libya. They had not one, but multiple plebiscites and referendums of the masses of people voting, saying, yeah, we support the Great September Revolution. The same thing happened in Burkina Faso with Thomas Sankara in the early 1980s. They had a military coup d'etat, and they had referendums, plebiscites to involve the people and make it the people's revolution. Well, that's what they did in Libya. So that's what made it mass. That's what made it democratic, the September Revolution. And then the overwhelming support that the Jamihiriya received from the Libyan people was the result of the policies of the Libyan Jamihiriya. Shakur talked a lot about healthcare. Healthcare was free in Libya. And since they nationalized Chevron oil, ran Chevron the hell out of Libya like they should have, and we need to run all these multinational capitalist corporations out of Africa. But that's what the Libyan September Revolution did. So now they had all this mass oil wealth that they could sell and control. And so they used that wealth to make healthcare free for their people. Instead of people dying from a headache or ingrown toenail infection, they had the healthcare to become healthy. Education was free. When you started a family, you were given the equivalent of 50,000 US dollars to start your family. You think that's insane because you can't even imagine something like this in the richest country in the world, but that's what they did in Libya. So they consolidated the support of the people for the Libyan Jamihiriya, the Great September Revolution. And one of the greatest things, Shakur touched on it, that they did was, and again, the QR code is there for our comrades in Burkina Faso. We're going to continually stress that. Please support it. Please put your smartphone up there and do it. please look at the link. If you don't have a smartphone, you see the link right above the QR code, www.patreon.com/Burkina Books, Burkina Books. Please go to the link. If you can't, scan the QR code, and please support our comrades on the ground. But what Libya was able to do with the great man-made lake that they built, there you see a picture of it, is the Sahara Desert is the most drought-stricken area on the planet Earth. It has been, and it always will be. And what the Libyan Jamihiriya did is they built a pipeline to bring in potable water to the people around the Sahara Desert, all of the regions around the Sahara Desert, Morocco, Chad, Sudan, all of those folks in that region, millions of people now, as of the 1990s, begin to have potable water, clean drinking water, water to clean with, water to farm with, to plant with, to do everything that we do water with, clean our bodies. They had it. So Libya created this outstanding project that provided potable water to all of these people in the 1990s. They did that. They funded it. Nobody had to pay anything. And all you have to do today, if you want to understand the importance that this project brought to people, is travel to that region. Go to places like Chad. Go to places like the Sudan and talk to people about what Libya did. And you'll see the response that people give you and how much they love the Libyan Jamihiriya and how much they love Muammar Gaddafi. They'll tell you themselves. You don't have to take our word for it. And then these human-made aqueducts were declared a wonder for the world as they provided this simple resource to millions of people who had never had it before and had to suffer without clean water. And those efforts, along with Libya's principled support for genuine revolutionary movements, because the Libyan Jamihiriya were some of the first people to support the liberation movements in Azania, or what you call by the colonized name South Africa during the apartheid years. They were some of the first people, along with Cuba, to support the African National Congress and the Pan-Africanist Congress and the Azanian People's Organization and the Black Consciousness Movement. They were some of the first people to do that. And that's why when Nelson Mandela got out of prison in 1990, the two things he did first were travel to Cuba and to Libya. He didn't come here first. He didn't come here because he knew George Bush was the one that told the South African government where he was in 1962 and put him in prison in the first place. And I'm not a Nelson Mandela fan. I'm just giving you the history that he went to Libya and Cuba because he knew that those are the people who supported that liberation movement all along. So the great man-made man-made lake providing potable water through these human-made aqueducts to millions of people is one of the legacies, along with the socialist system they put in place, healthcare, free education, to provide resources for people to be able to build lives and sustain themselves. You cannot tell us that the Libyan Jamihiriya was not largely supported by the masses of people in Libya. And we know that because the majority of the support for the Libyan Jamihiriya came from the Bojain region, the desert region in Libya. That's where the quote unquote Black people in Libya live, the Africans there, that's where they live. And as y'all know, in any situation, we're gonna be at the bottom of the society. And so revolutions are fought to uplift the people at the bottom of the society. So the quote unquote Black people of Libya were the most fervent supporters of the Libyan Jamihiriya because their lives and their quality of life arose dramatically as a result of that revolution. But the thing that signed the death note for Libya, and again, we have the QR code, support our comrades in Burkina Faso, please. But the thing that caused the death knell, as you see the picture there on the screen of a UN summit sometime in the early 2000s where Gaddafi was present. And I mean, I'm sorry, not in the early 2000s, sometime, I believe this was in 2009 when this happened. Gaddafi was present and Obama was present. And, you know, they shook hands and the media made a big deal about them shaking hands. They didn't have a conversation, but it was irrelevant anyway, because Obama knew at that time that his administration was working on a plan to try to destabilize the Libyan Jamihiriya. Why? Because the Libyan Jamihiriya at that time in 2009 was working to develop a plan to create one African currency, one form of African money for the entire African continent. And if you read the writings and speeches of Gaddafi, he was the one of the leaders of the African Union, which was the Organization of African Unity then, and he talked about it. He talked about the vision of Kwame Nkrumah and Pan-Africanism in Africa and how he wanted to make a serious contribution to it. And he talked about the need to create one currency. There's also the need to create one language in Africa. And people have been talking about this, and Nkrumah talked about it. Sheikh Anta Diop talked about it in the Cultural Unity of Black Africa in his book. The Senegalese activist and scholar talked about it. And we've talked about it for decades. And so Gaddafi was one of the first people to help actually bring some of that into existence by this concept of an African currency. Now, if you want to understand from a basic economic standpoint why that would be important, understand it like this. If you go like I have, you've gone to like Senegal, and you go from Senegal to Gambia, and you cross over the Gambian River. So you go there, you have, when you get to the border, you have Senegalese money, the CFA, in your pocket. And then once you get on the Gambian River, you're in Gambia, you have to use the Gambian currency, which is Dalasi, because Senegalese CFAs are worthless in Gambia. And Gambian Dalasi is worthless in Senegal. And that's the story of Africa. The money is not based on anything, because if you want to understand economics 101, the power of any currency is, what is it backed by? What is it supported by? If it's not supported by anything like these African currencies that I just described to you, then it's once you step outside of the realm where it's being used, it has no more value than a plain white piece of paper. Whereas the reason why the US dollar, the British pound, the French franc, the sterling, the euro, the reason why these currencies have value, the Canadian money, is because they're backed by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the terrorist international military apparatus that supports capitalism. They know that NATO can go in and destroy any enemy they have. So that's what keeps their currency strong. And the other way you keep currency strong is they're backed by natural resources. In the case of Libya, Gaddafi's plan was to create this African currency that would be backed by Libyan gold. Libya had tons of gold. And so this currency was to be called the dinar, and that was the plan, to make the dinar backed by Libyan gold and to introduce it on the world trade market as the one African currency that would replace all of these currencies I just mentioned, the Ghanaian cedi, the Tanzanian shilling, the Gambian dalasi, the Senegalese CFA, to replace all of that with one currency. Now, what this would do, had it been able to come into existence, is it would have changed the game in world economics. It would have created an African currency that would have had the power to compete with the European capitalist currencies. And the way the capitalist system works, that is not a possibility from the capitalist perspective. They are not trying to share power with oppressed people. So it was when this plan was introduced that the Obama administration knew that they had to get rid of Gaddafi and the Libyan Jamihiriya. And the way they knew they had to do that was to undermine the core of his support in Libya. And again, I told you, that was the benign people, the desert people, the quote unquote Black people. So they began at that time to engage in sabotage commando actions in that region of Libya through their AFRICOM program, the African Command, the US military presence in Africa that Obama proliferated in Africa. See, y'all think, you know, you just don't like him because he got Michelle and Sasha, whatever the hell his kid's name. We're way beyond that, you all. That's you on that petty level, that superficial level. We're talking about what's happening with our people around the world and how anybody that sits in the position of US president has the role and responsibility of advancing international capitalism. I don't care what color they are. They can be a one-eyed, transgender, purple Martian. If they get elected to be president of the United Snakes of America or prime minister of Britain or any of these criminal nations, their job is to uphold international capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, homophobia. That's their job, regardless of what they look like. And I don't know what the hell it's going to take for us to wake up and finally realize that and stop being pulled in by all this superficial nonsense. Because this man on the right in this picture, Barack Hussein Obama, was the central architect to destroying the Libyan Jamihiriya in North Africa. And by doing that, destroying the great man-made lake that provided the potable water to the millions of people around the Sahara Desert. They destroyed, NATO bombed the hell out of that whole Sahara Desert region and destroyed the man-made lake, destroyed all the aqueducts. They're not there anymore. People don't have any drinking water anymore. And that's your boy that did that. That's your damn house slave Negro Barack Obama who did that. Nobody else. You can't claim anybody else did it but him. You can say it was the white woman Hillary Clinton, but she worked for him. So how the hell is the blame solely on her? That was all of them. All of them were a bunch of crooks and criminals. And if the world had any justice to it right now, they would pay a price for that. But there's no accountability for them because all of us are walking around with our heads, you know where. Oh, he looks so nice with his family. The hell with that. We're trying to get to justice. I can show you all kind of African families that look nice and stand on principle. I don't need no symbol of that that's not based on nothing. So that's what these people did, is they engaged in this terrorist bomb. You want to know why we are against NATO with this Ukraine situation? It's not because we support Ukraine. It's not because we support Russia. I'm not down with none of them. None of them are doing anything to help the movement that I'm a part of, that I'm trying to do. You know, they're not doing that. I'm not down with none of them, but I'm not confused either. And I understand that NATO is an instrument of imperialism, of international capitalism. And just like Russia would be a fool if they weren't concerned about NATO. They're not a part of it. So of course they're going to be concerned about it, because unlike most of you, they know what NATO did in Libya. They know what NATO has done all over the world. They know that NATO is there to do only one thing: uphold the interests of Western capitalism at the price of anybody else. And they know that. And that's what happened in Libya. They bombed the hell out of Libya. They bombed the country so much, even the people who they appointed to run Libya, the so-called transnational council, where the hell it was, a bunch of thugs and criminals. And right now, today, Libya is one of the most dangerous places on earth, after being one of the most stable places in Africa for decades under the Jamihiriya. Today, it's one of the most dangerous places on earth, particularly for so-called Black people, quote unquote. Because, and you know, we're so stupid. We look at it today. Well, it's them Arabs. They don't like Black. Oh my God, shut up and read a book and stop being so happy to be so stupid. I don't know why we're so happy to be so stupid. We should be ashamed of ourselves. This is way bigger than your little small pea-brained understanding of the world. This is about imperialism. Imperialism did this. And they used the Arabs against our people because our people supported the Libyan Jamihiriya, which was led, if you paid any attention, by an Arab man. So your analysis that, the Arabs, it's so stupid. So we got to understand that they bombed that country into submission. And in doing so, that's the only reason why they found Gaddafi. Gaddafi was hiding in the underground tunnels, and they used NATO air technology to locate him in the tunnels, and they bombed him out of the tunnels. That's what NATO was all about, you all. In the picture on the bottom there, you see these people that supported imperialism. That's Barack Hussein Obama's brother there with his arm in there, harassing your people. You claim you so pro-Black, and that's what happened there because of your pro-Black president, Barack Obama, who led this whole thing. And we don't even get that. I mean, that's that in 2022, a whole decade after this happened, we're still confused. We're no closer to understanding it than we were in 2011. We have got to wake up. This man represents the system that has enslaved you for 500 years. He is not your friend. And if you don't believe me, go wherever the hell he is and try to run up on him and talk to him and see what happens to you if you're that confused. Because if he's such a friend of yours, see what happens to you when you try to do that. So we're just going to conclude and say they want to invite you back next week. We're going to have a program that I think we should have had a long time ago, but we just didn't. And that's Che Guevara in Africa and upending imperialism's efforts to discredit Che Guevara to African people. Very important program. Please tune in for that. Same time, same place. Go to our Forward Ever shop and buy whatever you can, because we need that support from you. Go join the APRP. Go to betterworld.me. These videos are there. You can get them. You can find out about them, spread them to people, do all those wonderful things, please. Hood Communist is a blog that you need to support and check out every week. Every Thursday, we have new articles there. And again, the Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity is a project that is a part of our work in the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. We're trying to keep it up and running. We need you to support, do the QR code there and support it. Please, James Brown, please, please, please support it. Please do that. And go to our programs. You see them on the bottom, support them. They'll be talking about the Thomas Sankara Center as well, because we got to get that. We got to make sure that that continues. We can't let imperialism win that way. And please continue to buy my book, Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. We appreciate each and every one of you. We are going to keep the Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity in Burkina Faso up, and we're going to build many more all throughout the African world. Forward ever, backwards never. We don't lose, we multiply, and we win. Have a great rest of your Sunday afternoon.